just really honored to be here. I absolutely love talking about this work. Because it's made such a difference in my life. I was actually saying to someone today that when this all sort of started to crystallize for me, it was a major turning point. That when I talk about integrating who you are with how you serve, it was very much started as a personal journey for me. And when I saw the relationship between what I was learning through personal development and spiritual development and how that connected to my professional world, I have not experienced burnout through service to other people since then. And that was well over 20 years ago. I sometimes hit the wall for other reasons. I can talk about that later, but it's never because of that work, because I had a way of sort of reframing it and developing an alternative perspective around what I was doing and what it meant to me. So it's been a really big part of my own self-care. But again, thank you for having me here. And I want to, celebrate with you that it's International Coaching Week and congratulate you on your milestones. I'm hoping that today a lot will resonate with you because I feel like coaches naturally are in tune with their sense of passion and really knowing that they're being drawn into the work that they want to do from that heartfelt space. They know what they want to be contributing. They know how they want to feel, and so I'm hoping that much of what I say today will resonate. And I'd like for it to be interactive. We don't have a lot of people here today, so there's more room for that kind of conversation as we go along. You'll see that I have space where I'm asking you different questions or putting things out there for reflection purposes, and hoping that we can have a little bit of experiential activity as well as the interaction. We'll save questions and answers until the end, so feel free to use the chat or the space for that. Now that's one thing I am not able to pull up right now. So you'll probably have to help me, Susanna, with the chat if people are putting things in there, because I can't see it. But we can also unmute and you can talk.
No worries, because myself and Janet and Denise, we're all going to keep an eye on it. Perfect.
Thank you. So today we will cover a little bit about the conscious service approach. I just want to give you a bit of an overview so it sets context for you as far as where I'm coming from. And then look at myth busting. I find that over the years, I've been in human services for about 40 years, that there's been a lot of myths that have emerged for me in terms of what it means to be of service. And I've realized how they've actually kind of contributed or perpetuated burnout and exhaustion and those kinds of things. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the conscious service approach itself has evolved into a set of guiding principles and what I call cardinal truths. So I've pulled out a few of those that we can, dig our teeth into a little bit more. So hopefully that will be of benefit to you. But I did have a question. Do all of you work with both individuals and organizations? I'm seeing some head nods. Yeah?
Individuals, organizations. So I think some of both.
Okay, good, because there's a section here that we'll get to that might be really helpful for you in terms of any of the work that you might be doing with organizations around relationship building and co-creating community, which I think could become a big part of your role as we move beyond this COVID-19 crisis. So for me, self-care, sometimes that's what happens. You have a crisis like this and it really puts it in the forefront. The other thing I'm noticing is that there's a much bigger spotlight on healthcare and social services in general. Mostly healthcare, mostly hospital-based professions, but just a sort of an overall societal awareness of how important that part of our world is and how we can all at some point come to rely on the services of people working in healthcare and social services. So I think it's an opportune time to be having conversations about systems transformation and things like that. But that's a whole other piece we'll talk about a little bit more later. So the conscious service approach, as I was mentioning in the beginning, really evolved initially, or I guess was inspired initially through my own personal scenario. So I had been in the field, I started working in developmental services in an institutional setting as a student when I was 15 years old. And that's how old I am. Institutions were still open at that point. And then I went into developmental services work, which was the name of the program I went into, and then did a lot of community-based work after that, went into brain injury rehab. And it was during my time in brain injury rehab that I had some crisis in my own personal life. And that led me down the journey of kind of self-discovery and really starting to think about self-reflective practice. And luckily, the organization I was working for at that time was really open to me bringing in some of these ideas and playing with them and involving the team I was working with at that point in there. And I really saw some wonderful things happen. Like it really helped to deepen some of the skills that we knew were important in human services, but bring them from the knowing and the intellectual piece and into the actual doing. So when I went into my research in my adult education program, Masters of Adult Education, I was trying to figure out how do you best facilitate self-reflective practice in the helping professions, because I was also teaching at that time too. So I would be working with groups of people who wanted to go into helping professions. And it was like, how do you actually foster this and help people to develop a practice that's going to be so important to their self-care and their personal and professional growth? So it started off that way. And then I realized it was way more than that it wasn't just about us having self-awareness or, journaling at the end of the day or things like that we needed to learn how to be self-reflected and connected as we communicated with each other, as we created relationship, not only with the people we serve, but also the people we serve with, our colleagues in our organizations, community partners, and what that looked like in terms of co-creating community. So if you think of some of the old terminology, it is designed to take self-awareness to a place of self-connection, to take effective communication into enlightened communication, which to me is really about embodying what we all know is important in terms of communicating effectively, but sometimes don't always practice. And then moving from therapeutic kinds of relationships, which was a term that we used a lot in my background, in my previous work, moving from therapeutic to transformative relationships. And then how that informs how we co-create community. So moving out of the sort of the team building, community building framework and into the idea that we're all contributing to the way that community is structured and how our organization's culture is developed. So you can see by the diagram that it doesn't have sort of a starting point. It's a circle. It can go either way. As we become more self-connected, we have a greater capacity for enlightened communication. As we create that with each other, we have way more likelihood of creating transformative relationships, which as well is not just about the transformation in other people. It's about the transformation that's going on inside of us during those relationships or in those interactions. So really about reciprocity. And then, the most vibrant communities are going to be the ones that are based in transformative relationships where people are communicating on a really high level, very much connected, know what they're there to contribute, and that there's space for that to happen. So that is the conscious service approach in a nutshell. And as I mentioned, what ended up evolving out of that was a set of 10 guiding principles with associated cardinal truths, is what I'm calling them right now. I always say this is the approach in its current iteration because it seems to always be evolving and shifting for me. But it is something that is definitely a practice. That's why I called it an approach. It's not a model that's just a stagnant kind of thing. It's a practice, it's an approach because it's very subjective and personal. So there's nothing in it that says this is the way that you need to think or this is the value that you need to have. It's about what is it that you bring with you, your values, your ideas, your perspectives, and how that informs your practice and your experience of that. And I really feel like, you know, our experience as service providers, our experience of vocational fulfillment has an absolute direct impact on the quality of our service. So if we're feeling really fulfilled in what we're doing, it's almost for sure that what we're offering is going to land somewhere in an effective, impactful, powerful way with other people, because they feel that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Any thoughts or ideas around that so far?
What I'm doing, Elizabeth, just to let you know, is I'm capturing some of the things that you say and I'm posting them on the chat.
Awesome.
For everybody.
Thank you.
Just quick highlights.
Perfect. Thank you very much. One of the things I meant to say too, with the last slide, is that one of the things I've noticed over the years is that quite often people who come into this kind of work, whether it's a coach or whether you're a nurse, a social worker, mental health worker, whatever, are really hardwired to give. And I think you were sort of touching on that, Suzanne, at the beginning when you were talking about that, about giving to the people that you're coaching, giving to your families, and we're really comfortable with that extension of ourselves that way. And then sometimes we have a challenge in receiving. It's way easier to give than it is to receive. Can anyone relate to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other way that I think about that is a lot of times in our industry, we're also accommodators. So while we're giving, it may be an opportunity that we're not necessarily giving, but because we want to give, we're accommodating because we just, our nature is to allow that other person to be in a safe place or where they need to be. So I think sometimes we accommodate is the way that I put it, you know, and maybe so accommodate, because it's so important for us that others have the safe space and the care that they need, that I think sometimes we forget that we need the safe space and self-care as well. Absolutely.
Thank you, Denise. I think that's so true. I think that's one of the biggest, you know, most profound things that happens to us. And I think, I really believe, again, like I said in the beginning, that the majority of people that come into this work come because they felt called. I mean, that's been my experience in the people that I've met over the years. There's a calling, a sense that they can help, they can contribute, there's a difference they can make. But there's certain myths, and we'll get into this, that perpetuate the idea that it's always about the other person. And when we're already hardwired to give and be focused on other people, it becomes a real job and a task to get connected inside of ourselves and to be listening there. And then we're going to get depleted, right? We definitely are. Or we think of receiving as coming from another person. So it's like we're expecting that we're going to get some kind of gratitude or appreciation from the people that we're working with. And I think, you know, probably as a coach, you probably receive that a little bit more frequently than, say, somebody who's working in downtown East Side, you know, on the streets. So reciprocity is not so much about the give and take transactional piece as it is creating a space of openness and receptivity, so that all that we want to offer in our work with other people, like compassion, like respect, like empathy, we are opening ourselves to receive from within first and creating that space inside, and then we're coming from that overflow. And it makes a big, big difference in our energy and I think our enthusiasm and just in our ability to feel like we're caring for ourselves, you know, our own health and well-being.
I want to make a point.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes. I just also, besides being very accommodated, that it's with most of our natures, I think we also try to overserve, and the person doesn't have a chance to take with self-responsibility. And we are assuming, that they need us, and probably that will interfere with their development.
Thank you so much, Martha. That is such an important point. I always think of it as, overextension or false responsibility, and then sometimes too, we let our identity get very, very wrapped up in our ability to help other people. And, that's where I think depletion and disillusionment really starts, because I think when you've been in the field for a long time, working with people for a long time, you do get rewarded in a way by watching an evolution happen over a long period of time. But you have to learn how to look for the little things. It's not usually a really big transformation with a lot of people. It's very subtle. And I think one of the best ways we practice seeing that in others is to do it with ourselves. So when I think of the transformative piece, the transformative relationships, again, it's not about, everyone's going to transform and around me, like magic, but that I'm going to look at myself every day and say, how am I transformed through what I'm doing? How are my interactions and my relationships transforming me, and what am I learning? And really getting curious about that, because that energy then really creates the space for other people. Plus it makes us so much better able to see it, and how things are happening. And that it's those little things that become so rewarding over time. It really, truly is. But I loved what you were saying, because I don't think I've included it in the slides here, but one of the things I put together when I was doing this work, I called the engagement continuum. And what you were saying, Martha, and to Denise, around the sort of the overextension and overdoing it, reminds me of that. So when we're engaged, like you think of it on a continuum, in the center, the sweet spot is engagement. And it can be really important to, take a moment with any of these things and ask ourselves, what does it feel like to be engaged? Like, how do I know when I'm engaged? How do I feel inside? What is that, what am I thinking? Just what are the body sensations? What are my emotions like? And then on either end of that spectrum, we have enmeshment. So that's when we get all lost in other people, right? So their problems are our problems. Their victories become our victories. If they're not doing well, we're not doing well. If they're all those kinds of things, right? So everything that we're feeling inside is dictated by what the other person is doing or feeling. So we really become disconnected from ourselves and disengaged, because now we can't see. Like, we're right. It's like if somebody falls into the metaphorical, black hole, and we think we're going to help by crawling in there with them. It's basically that, right? So we're totally lost. And on the other end of the spectrum is estrangement. So that's when we get so frustrated with, say, a lack of progress, or, somebody, a human being, continuing a habitual pattern that we wish that they would just come out of, more quickly, that we almost become angry, with what's happening. And again, disengaged. And we kind of feel like we need to protect ourselves then from what happens in the lives of other people and what we're witnessing. And, I think you see less of that in coaching, but you definitely see a lot of it if you're working with people, say with addictions or mental health challenges or things like that, right? But if we think about it, we all have our habits, we all have our patterns, and we can have that same kind of frustration with ourselves, like, oh God, I'm here again. Why am I doing this again? That kind of thing. So it's about learning that compassion. And if we stay in an engaged space, then we know that we are connected with other people. We have the greatest capacity to stay connected because we're centered in ourselves, and we need to be there, right? If we lose ourselves in enmeshment or harden up out of estrangement, we're not there anymore. Not really. So engagement allows us to be fully present, and we're receiving them at the same time. Like, we're there, and people can feel that, but we move in and out of that all the time. So that's why I say it's so important for us to connect to what that feels like in our bodies, and notice when we step out, and then find those ways that we can pull ourselves back in. And so I think if we're in, that place of false responsibility or overextension, then we're not engaged anymore, because now we're trying to solve or fix something, right? That, you know, or we're getting back into that sort of identity connection to the progress of other people, you know, and how important that is. And I remember going through that, you know, as a young person, just out of college. I got my dream job at the time, and I was working with adults who had a developmental disability, and they were living in the community. And so they needed all variety of supports in order to be independent. And there was a few people who had different things going on, and I did not know, because I did not learn. I learned about burnout and the high risk of burnout in school, but I didn't learn about how you actually navigate those situations when you find yourself in it. So I'd be awake at night worrying about what if, you know, Joe Blow, you know, does that risky thing. And then how's that going to look on me? And then that'll look like I'm not doing my job. Like I somehow felt like I needed to prevent that from happening. So about 2 months into that job, I woke up not wanting to go in. I mean, this was a job I cried tears of joy when they offered it to me, you know. And so I knew I'd already hit that first wall, and something was missing. I couldn't articulate. I think it was 20 years old at the time. I couldn't articulate what it was, or, you know, it took me several years to start getting around to that and figuring it out. But it was definitely a disillusionment and a depletion. And it had so much to do with a sense of false responsibility and what I thought was expected of me by other people, and even the people who I was providing service to at that time. So it was a useful experience once I made sense out of it. But let's talk about some myths here. So I've listed a few on the slide here. And I think this top one, it just speaks to me so much, but that service means sacrifice. Anybody relate to that? Or having heard that, you know, it's a part of me that needs to sacrifice. And I just think that it's so...
That comes from Kant. Kant said that if it didn't hurt, it wasn't worthy.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had such a fight with the philosophy professor. Almost threw me out of the class.
But it's thank you, Martha, because that's such a strong mindset in so many different ways, that everything is through pain, right? That it's blood, sweat, and tears, and it's painful. And then somehow you deserve a victory on the other side, that we're not already just deserving, you know, of joy and peace and fulfillment. And I think too, that the whole idea around sacrifice, I think some of this is religiously, you know, perpetuated as well. Like if you think of, you know, even where social work started way back, a lot of that came out of religious ideas, right? So it often has to do too with people being, you know, the person who's providing service has more power than the person receiving it. You know, we're helping the less fortunate, the more vulnerable. I mean, we're certainly hearing that in our society right now with this COVID-19 crisis as well. How many people in any of your training or through your years have heard the idea that it's not about you? It's about the people you're serving. It's not about you, not about what you think. It's not about what's important to you. It's not about how you're feeling. It's not about you. And I think it's all about you. I think it's absolutely all about you. That who you are is your unique essence that you bring to it.
I was going to say, Elizabeth, that in some cultures, sacrifice is rewarded, right? It's seen as, in a lot of cultures, sometimes even it's part of religious beliefs. Yes. In certain cultures. And so when, you know, people may have a miserable life, right? And then they remember them, oh my gosh, she was a saint because, you know, look at how much she sacrificed. And so it's perceived as something good when it's not. It's not doing anybody any good.
Totally. And I think that was one thing I learned in my religious studies part of my education, because I was raised in a Lutheran, you know, religion, and we went to Sunday school and got confirmed and went to church and all that stuff. And when I did my religious studies course, I took a program. I took a variety of different things, and I just started to interpret it differently. And I realized, you know, so much of any kind of religious teachings, there's some core beliefs or values that are common through most of them, you know, around enlightenment and joy and peace and, you know, those kinds of things. It's something beyond us, like that kind of stuff. But nowhere in there does it actually say it's like the human interpretation. So even when they talk in the Bible about what Jesus said this or said that, it's the human interpretation of what he said, you know, which was also interpreted in the time, the cultural time, that has been perpetuated. But if you kind of pare back and go to the nitty-gritty of what's being said, it's not necessarily what we've interpreted it to mean, you know. So that's a little bit off on a tangent, but it's just, I really think that religious piece does have something to do with it. And I know that can be a trigger too for a lot of people. So how about my values don't matter, which kind of goes back to the it's not about me thing. I've had people when I've gone for counseling and stuff myself that, you know, have said, you know, like, it's not about my values. Like, I leave all my values and my beliefs at the door. And I think there's no way you do. There's no way. And you need to have that in order to guide your own process, right? We need to be connected to our own values. So I always think of, you know, our values are not there as a measuring stick that other people have to live up to. They're there to guide our own practice and our own actions, right? The same with our belief systems. And values and beliefs can be interpreted and reinterpreted and all of that. And I know that you know this as coaches, because I'm sure that you work with that element when you're working with the people that you provide service to. Or my life will feel fulfilled if I focus on others and helping others. Anybody relate to that one? I mean, sometimes too, it can be about things that you get done, you know, in a day. But sometimes we'll feel like, well, did I do anything? Did I have an impact on anyone? You know, if I'm just laying on the couch today because that's what I feel like I need, do I then feel like I'm somehow less valuable? You know?
I think the one thing that's interesting is I think a lot of times that becomes a habit. So the habit becomes, you know, I have to answer my husband's text and my son's text and my daughter's text and my sister's, you know, it's like you get to where you're there to help others and it becomes a habit, and it's hard to break that habit, and it can get in the way of you doing the things that you want or need to do, you know, for yourself, because it becomes such a habit to help others.
Yeah. And it's like we lose ourselves, right?
Right.
We lose pieces of ourselves along the way, and then nothing is fulfilling because we're kind of showing up as empty shells, right? And so we need to have that part there. And I really think being in tune, and we'll talk about this later too, being in tune with our passions and our curiosity is one of the best ways that we can demonstrate self-care. You know, really saying that what matters to me matters to me. You know, it's important that I feel passionate. It's important that I feel enthusiastic. And that is a benefit for other people, but that's not the reason to do it. You know, it's kind of like, we'll get into this in a second. I'll wait until we get there. Let's finish this last one because I think it's really timely right now. That service providers are heroes, or they're saints, or they're angels. How does that feel if I were to call you a hero, a saint, or an angel?
I think I would feel very awkward, although you hear it all the time, right? But it's really hard for it to sync with me. I guess sometimes we help our clients in a way that they may see us as heroes, but actually they're doing the work, and all we're doing is what we love doing.
Absolutely. There's a thing, a movement here going on, or a project going on that some local creatives and photographers have been doing here in Vancouver. It's called Humans of Support. It's actually really beautiful, beautiful photography. I'm so happy that they called it Humans of Support. But a little while ago, they had featured a street nurse who works in our downtown east side here. And she said in her little blurb, I'm not, I don't like being referred to as a hero. I am a person who is passionate about my work. This is what I want to do. This is my career, but I'm not a hero. And so I just, I remember the first time they didn't call me a hero, but they called me special, and maybe you've heard that too. Oh, you must be so special, or you must be so special to work with people like that, which again, really, that power imbalance there, perceived power imbalance. But I remember it felt so strange. And I didn't like it, but I didn't know why. And then when I've thought about it over the years, for one thing, if we're painted as a hero, a saint, an angel, special, we're kind of placed on a pedestal, and most of the time we fall off of pedestals, or we know inside of ourselves that there's parts of us in our own shadows and our own life experiences that would not qualify us as a saint or an angel or any of those kinds of things. And it can make us feel guilty or feel unworthy of it. But the one thing I looked with all this hero talk and the superhumans and all of that that's going on right now, I looked up heroes just to see what it said. And you know what one of the hallmark features was? Sacrifice. And I thought that's part of the reason why it's bugging me so much. And I think what happens is it strips away people's humanity, and people working in service to other people have got to be seen as human beings. None of us are immune from any of the challenges that we would be walking through with other people.
Since this is a very small group, I want to share with you what my son told me. My son, he's a police officer. He works for Henderson Police Department, which is right next to Las Vegas. So he was there when they had that shooting in Mandalay Bay. I was in Mexico City, and I woke up in the middle of the night knowing something was terribly wrong. But that's not the story. The story is like later he told me he didn't want to talk about it. And then he told me that he didn't like to be called a hero. And I said, why not? He says, because we're not heroes. We were trained for this. We had the equipment. We had great guidance. Heroes were the people who were there with no training, who put their lives at risk helping strangers. Those are the heroes. We're no heroes. And he made a point of that. I mean, he told everybody that would say something to him, we're not here, we're doing our jobs. And we were trained for this. So.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Martha. And I think it just goes to show the discomfort with being called a hero, or being perceived that way. And I mean, what if we just looked at ourselves as our own heroes? We all have our journey, we all have our path. We all have the things that we need to move through in our life and overcome and struggle with and have victory with and all of those things. What if we just looked at being the hero of our own journey, really? Because we are. I mean, this is our adventure, right? It's our life. And we are the hero. We're the main character. Even though we think that all of the other people are the more important ones, let's say. And look at it more as an equal kind of sharing. So that kind of actually fits really good in with this first guiding principle that's related to self-connection. The most meaningful pilgrimage you will ever make is the one that leads you to the core of your being. And this came to me when I was thinking about all of the stories that are out there around pilgrimages and people leaving and taking off and doing something. You have to sort of abandon your whole life and go on some mission somewhere or whatever in order to find yourself. And that often happens in those situations. But I really believe that it's more just a decision in the moment to get really connected with what's going on in the inside. And we can do that anywhere, at any time, just through setting the intention. And I think that it is one of the most rewarding parts of being a human being and being alive, is to witness our own evolution through the experiences of our life. And I think that's what makes people really good coaches and really good service providers, because they're willing to go to the places that we might be asking other people to go to, that we're willing to do that kind of work first, you know, or at least at the same time. Because it really truly is, you know, it's a practice and it's a process. Like there's no destination here. I think there's destination points, you know. So when I think of the conscious service approach, or I think of activities that help me feel self-connected, there are different points where I feel like, oh, I'm here right now, or I notice that, like I have a sense of presence or whatever it might be, or I notice some growth that's happened. But the majority of it is just the journey and just the practice and learning how I'm going to respond to myself and to life. So here's one of the cardinal truths that's associated with that guiding principle around self-connection. Self-compassion is the result of self-love, and self-care evolves organically in that energetic space. So self-care is not something to do, like we often think, right? Oh, I'll schedule it in, or I just got to create 1 hour in the day, you know, where it can just be about me and whatever I want to do. And sometimes we're so exhausted that, you know, all you want to do is lay there and watch TV, you know? Or people will save it until Friday night, and then it's a bubble bath and a bottle of wine. And then on Saturday, you feel like crap, you know, or like things like that we're sort of using as a means of kind of letting down or relaxing. So self-care to me is not, and it's not to just about, are we getting enough sleep? Are we eating the right foods? Are we getting exercise? Those are all part of it, but it's much deeper. So, and even beyond the caring of our emotional health and our mental health and our spiritual health. And to me, it really gets into that sense of purpose and passion again, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, and really honoring that. What am I curious about? And what do I want to learn about? And what do I want to contribute? And what makes me feel good? And making that a very important aspect of self-care. I think when we can keep working on loving ourselves, like truly feeling a sense of love for ourselves, that, as this statement says, it organically flows out of that. So it's more about that connection in the moment, like where we ask ourselves, well, what do I need? You know? So it might not be, you know, looking for the loopholes to get out of something on a bad day, but if I've got a commitment and maybe I don't feel the energy I thought I was going to feel to see this commitment through, but I also know that I'm going to do, what kinds of things are going to help me with that? How can I support myself through it? What would be a compassionate approach to myself? Because there's forcing ourselves to do it, and then there's nurturing ourselves through doing it. You're still doing it, but it's the way that we respond to ourselves in that space. So there's, you know, suck it up and crack the whip and let's just get going. Or, you know, we can talk to ourselves and say, yeah, I understand. You don't really feel like it, and that's okay. And we could just maybe sit with that for a second. And what would help you? What would help you? What would help me? And then see if you can give yourself that. I was talking with someone earlier today, and she was, you know, talking about, you know, the practice in her own life around growth and self-care and things like that. And we started talking about mastery. And I said, you know, mastery is the practice. It's, again, it's not a destination. We master something, but I think a master keeps learning and keeps growing and keeps evolving. And I think the other piece too, when we're learning about self-care, we learn it so we can use it, right? It does very little for us just to know it. It really doesn't matter. And that's probably true of most things. You know, we learn things, especially like this, that we're called then to use. And life always gives us the opportunity, doesn't it? Like, you know, we never sort of get over a hurdle and it's like, okay, I got that done. No, then something comes up again that's similar life experience, and we're called to bring all that we discovered in maybe a different challenge to a new experience. So here's just a couple of questions that you might want to, you know, think about right now. And if you do have some ideas that you want to share, feel free to voice that. This one was super powerful for me that I learned through a gentleman named Christopher Witecki. He's a spiritual astrologer, actually. And he kept asking us all the time, how would you talk to yourself? How would you talk to you if you were a child you loved? So when you're struggling or overwhelmed, you know, because it can be easy, again, to sort of keep cracking the whip, and we want to make ourselves earn something, you know, before we give ourselves a break or a rest or whatever. But how would we talk to ourselves if we saw ourselves as a little child? And what would we say? So you can think about that. And then just think for yourself, how do you demonstrate self-love and self-compassion? Like, how does that show up in your own life, and the practices that can help you to integrate or to deepen those acts of self-love and self-compassion? Does anybody have any ideas that pop to mind that you'd like to share? We'll talk more about questions like this. I call them powerful guiding questions because I think they're powerful, you know, in terms of following curiosity and guiding us toward, you know, our own personal truth and our own answers, which is, to me, a really powerful form of self-care. So would everybody here say that self-care is a part of your daily routine? Would you? Maybe some no. You say yes, Susanna? Sorry, go ahead.
I would say, I'm sorry. I say yes. It took me a very long time to get there, right? To say, to go from I don't have time for this to I don't have time not to do this.
Beautiful.
I think mine are ebbs and flows, which obviously tells you it's not enough of a habit and enough of a focus in order for it to, you know, be a as high a priority as it needs to be.
Right.
It's consciously there.
Yeah.
I think is a start.
I think that's a huge piece. Yeah. Because the awareness, like when we get connected to a point where we know when we're in self-connection, or we know when we're in a state of engagement, we know when we're in integrity, and we know when we step out, because we're always going to, like, nothing's static, right? But then we have that information to make a new choice in the moment. Super powerful. One of the things I'll offer to you here too is a strategy, and I learned this through, well, it was a combination of my naturopath, Jenny Kundari, and my counselor, Gwen Bevan. So Jenny was talking one time and said to me, so we were talking about, you know, coping strategies and stuff. So she talked about having 2 lists for the times when you're in overwhelm. And on one list, it's all the yes things. So I'll take 5 minutes, I'll go get a glass of water, I'll make myself a cup of tea, I'll take a quick walk around the block, whatever it is. These are my go-tos when I'm overwhelmed. And then you have a no list. And these are all of the things that you know that you like to go to for coping strategies, but they usually end up bringing you into a place that feels worse. And it's not like they're on the no list for everything and all the time. They're just the no list when you're overwhelmed or stressed, you know? So when we're reaching for something outside of ourselves, or something to feel better, we've got our yes list, we've got our no list. And then you make the commitment. So, and then you know, you're getting into a space in the moment where you can check in with yourself and say you start feeling like, oh geez, I really want to have that glass of wine. So then you can start asking questions. I'm using myself as an example. You can start asking questions like, what's that about? Like, do I want it because I'm going to enjoy it with my dinner? Or I want it because I'm feeling like extra tired or overwhelmed today? And is that really where I want to go? What's on my yes list? So it doesn't have to mean I can never have a glass of wine. It's just, you know, and somebody else was talking about too, it's mindful consumption versus, you know, stress-fueled consumption. So that was really powerful. And then I was talking to my counselor about it, and she said, the other list is your foundations list. So you have a third list, and those are the things that are really important to you for your day-to-day well-being. They're your foundation. And it doesn't mean that there won't be days where you step out of it, but you know what those key things are. And so that might include, you know, the rest or the breaks or the food or the exercise, but it might also include things like, I need to have a good laugh every day. I need to get on the phone with a loved one every day. I need to have, you know, whatever it might be, the things that are foundational for you. And it's powerful to just, as you know, as coaches, powerful to write that kind of stuff down. I shared it with one of my friends. So we've never met in person, but we've been writing buddies for about 4 years, and we Zoom call every week. And so we share stuff like, I know it's just beautiful. And we share stuff like this all the time in our Google Docs. And so then she had a few things I integrated, and I had a few things she integrated. And not so much to hold each other to the yes and no list or the foundations list, but just to be there as a support and reminder that, remember, your lists are there. Have you looked at those ones, you know, or whatever, right? And that was really effective too. So just a little strategy there. Okay, so this guiding principle, we're moving into the enlightened communication piece here now. So to me, effective communication is mainly an intellectual practice, but enlightened communication emerges from spirit and utilizes all of our resources. So it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's physical, you know, we're bringing our whole self there. Because I don't know how many classes over the years that I've taken around effective communication. And, you know, people can be using their iMessages and you're looking at you and everything else, but they can be cutting you with their words, you know, because there's an energy underneath it. So enlightened communication is kind of like, what is the element, the energetic element that lies beneath the way that we communicate? So like setting our intention, say we're going into a conflict resolution. We can go in with a conscious awareness of our intentions and sort of working that out before we go into it. Or we can go in not thinking about that and then coming out feeling very frustrated because we didn't win. And then we realize after the fact that we weren't there to come up with a grand resolution. We were there to get the other person to think the way that we were thinking. And that was really the underlying intention. But if we're not looking at that, self-connected, then we miss those things. So it's that underlying energy. Or if we think about compassion, well, what does compassion feel like? And how does it express itself? You know, there's a lot of talk in our circles about compassion fatigue, and you've probably heard this before too, but, you know, compassion does not make us tired. Compassion is a derivative of love. Love is an uplifting energy. And when we get tired, it's usually because there's been a lack of self-compassion, or there's been maybe we had a goal, an outcome. We thought our compassion was going to create a certain outcome with somebody else. And when it doesn't, you know, that's when we sort of fall into that estrangement end of the engagement continuum, right? Because a lot of the times that's what we're kind of gauging our value and our success, our contribution on, is whether or not there's changes outside of us. So that's what enlightened communication is about. And of course, we always talk about this one, being non-judgmental, right? So I've met students over the years coming into courses saying, you know, I'll be good at this because I'm so non-judgmental. You know, I don't judge anybody. And I always laugh because it's like, oh God, it takes us a long time sometimes to realize that we do operate in judgment, that it's there. We're socialized and conditioned that way. And part of it is about how we discern what's best for us and what isn't. But a lot of the times we put our judgments on other people, right? So to me, it's more about learning to suspend judgment long enough to see past it. So again, that's another place that we could close our eyes right now and imagine what judgment feels like inside your body. When you go into a place of judgment, whether it's about other people or yourself, you know, where do you feel it? What does it feel like? You know, what happens to the way that you think? What happens to your emotional landscape or how you communicate when you're in that place? You know, and even sometimes when we're just telling the story in our head, you know, a judgmental story about somebody else. I had a situation last week I was out for a little walk. It was a beautiful day and I was feeling great. And I had my headphones in, and the mail delivery person was at our little post office box outside, and I'd been waiting for something. So I saw him and I kind of got all excited because I thought, oh, maybe it's finally here, you know? And I walked up to him and I got way too close. And I just didn't even think about it. I wasn't even thinking about the physical distancing or anything. I walked up and I said, hi there, you know, and he turned around and swore at me and yelled at me on the street and just like took a strip off me. And I was standing there and said, I'm sorry, I apologize. He said, go inside the house. Well, I went, I mean, I felt like I was about 8 years old and I was in big trouble. And I could have cried. I just felt like it was horrible, right? So it brought up a lot of stuff for me. But my ego really wanted to go into how wrong he was and what an ass he was. And, you know, how somebody needed to X, Y, and Z. And it went on for a while. And then I thought, you know what? Like, just relax for a minute and what's going on inside of me. And then I had somebody say to me, oh, he's probably had 15 people do it. Yeah, too soon. I don't want to hear about the 15 people, you know, that maybe got in his space before me and I got the backlash, you know. But that's probably very true. But I just noticed what was happening inside of me, and I got through. But then the next morning I woke up and it was super intense again. And then I was telling myself all these stories and about what if I see him there today, and, you know, then I imagined he would apologize to me, and then how would I respond? Like all this, you know, I mean, a whole big thing. And I had to come back several times to just say, you know, let it not be about him. Let it just be that I happened to be there. He was there. It was a moment. And what's going on inside of me has only to do with me. Only to do with me. And something got triggered. Something came up for healing. You know, I'm telling myself a story about myself. And, you know, if I deserved that, or it's not okay to be wrong or make a mistake, like all kinds of things. So there's so much when judgment comes up for us. It can be so rich for our own learning, even though it usually feels horrible, you know? So, sorry, go ahead.
I make a comment on judgment. I actually one time did a judgment journal around something that I was really struggling with. And I did it for 7 days. So every day I would journal about this, you know, judgment that I really had about this particular situation. And what was really fascinating was then being able to go back and unpack all of that, and really to like the slide says, long enough to see past it.
Yeah.
It was that journaling and that unpacking those things, that judgment that was getting in the way, that really allowed me to see past the particular situation that I was, you know,
yeah,
the judgment in. And it was pretty powerful.
That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Because I think the key is the turning point when judgment comes up is our decision to get curious. So if we seek to understand, you know, if it's another person or if it's to understand ourselves, we can't hold judgment and a willingness to understand at the same time. So we have to let go of something. And we might go back and forth, you know, like we usually do. But if we have that openness and that curiosity to understand the other person or ourselves, then judgment becomes something that can really, you know, be powerful in terms of our own evolution, our personal growth, and our service. Because the people that we work with are going to trigger a lot of judgment. They totally are, you know, and that often too is just like an illumination of, you know, maybe a value system that we're holding, that we're looking through. That we see this person through, where maybe their values are very different from our own, you know, so it illuminates those things. It gives us an opportunity to look at the lens that we see things through, ourselves, other people, the world. And I think this is something that we don't spend enough time talking about, because we just all agree that, yeah, we're meant to be non-judgmental. Well, that's fine. That's great. But unless we are examining what those judgments and biases are, we're more likely to impose that on other people. But if we're paying attention to it with self-compassion, self-love, a desire to understand ourselves, then we'll know, oh, judgment just came up here. Like that's something they just said really pushed my button. So how am I going to just acknowledge it for myself while I'm in the moment and come back and intentionally switch to a desire to understand. And just let it be lingering up here. And then I can, like you were saying, good terminology, unpack it later.
One practice that I use is from the trust, the behaviors of trust from Stephen M. Covey. I don't know if you read, this is a wonderful book, to me anyhow. It's called The Speed of Trust. And in there, one of the behaviors to suspend judgment is to give the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about your experience, and I was thinking of what happened to me a couple of hours ago, that one of these coaches that was for, like a pro bono program. Today was his first session and didn't show up. I mean, was late, wasn't there 20 minutes, so I am all mad because I made space for him, and I am thinking this guy is not committed, and I text him, I said, what happened? And then, I forgot, so you're thinking all these thoughts of this guy, he's never gonna do it.
Yes.
He forgot, but he was very much engaged when he finally connected. So anyhow,
That's a beautiful thing.
I needed to suspend my judgment there and give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yes, but see how cool that is though, right? Because you get to see, here's the story I go to right away. Yes. About him and then about me too, right? Like, I don't know what kinds of things. But when you were talking, I thought, oh yeah, when stuff like that happens to me, I start feeling like I'm disrespected, that people actually don't value what I have to offer, that it's not good enough, that's part of the story that I'll go into in addition to what I think about them, right? Right. A sense of humor really helps too, I have to say, because last week when this happened in the morning, I thought, wow, like every time I address it, when I would notice it was coming up, I would address it, and a little while later, it would be back again. And finally, I just started to laugh. And I thought, like, how long are we going to do this? How many different variations and scenarios can you, like, it's not happening. It isn't happening right now. And I just found it so comical. And as soon as I started laughing about it to myself, and I think I got to the couple of nuggets I needed to get to, it went away. So like now talking about it, I have no emotional charge. There's nothing there. Where in those first couple of days when I spoke about it, which was not very much, but even when I thought about it, I had an emotional reaction and sort of relived that, So very powerful. And really, again, I think this is another example of not only how we are giving to the people that we're providing service to through suspending judgment, but we're also receiving. And we're learning about ourselves. Like, that's the receptivity, that's the reciprocity there, and our capacity to receive. So here are a few questions or a little exercise that you can do as well. And you'll have these slides, so feel free to play with this later. But to identify the judgments and biases that you already know about, because we already have some, right, that we know about, things that might be a trigger point or a button. Identifying those, but really getting in touch with what does it feel like when you go into a state of judgment, because that's going to give information for the in the moment when it comes up and kind of blindsides us, right? And then thinking about what helps you to transcend it. I think this is a really powerful question in a lot of different ways. Are you willing to be wrong? Are you willing to be wrong about the story, the other person, yourself, the situation? Lots of different things we can ask about if we're willing to be wrong, our projection of what's going to happen. And then really think about, conjuring up that energy of curiosity and understanding, and then using questions. And I know as coaches, you're going to be very, very skilled at using questions in order to, prompt self-discovery or exploration with other people. So some of the highlights around a powerful, what I think of as powerful guiding questions, or the characteristics, is to look at the difference between a limiting question or an expansive question. So to me, an expansive question is something that moves us in the direction that we want to go. It's formed in a way that provides a lot of different bits of information or opportunity to gather information, as opposed to a limiting question, which might be really attached to a certain outcome, you know, so might not generate a lot of ideas. The journey of a question for me, and I learned this way, way back, I think when I was teaching a student success course or something like that, they talked about how when we ask a question, our brain automatically goes on an expedition to start gathering the information or to find the answers. So the way that we ask that question is super important. We can ask a question that just has our brain looking for more evidence, you know, to validate something that maybe we, you know, don't really want to keep in our lives. Or we can ask a question that gets us moving in a direction that brings more information, more powerful information in. So some guidelines for powerful questioning. I'll just go through these super quick because I feel like, what time is it, Susanna? I can't see the time.
It is 7:08.
So it is.
We have 22 minutes.
Thank you. So asking questions that start with what and how instead of why, because why often implies, you know, a judgment, or we have to validate, or we have to, you know, explain something or whatever. So we ask what and how questions. So instead of why do I keep feeling this way, maybe what can I learn from this feeling? Or this is a recurring theme, you know, what does it have to tell me? How can I grow from it? So formulating those questions and then learning to let go, because you know how sometimes we stay really attached to getting the answer. So learning to be able to let go and just, you know, you're intuitive. I can hear that coming through the conversation today. So letting go and just allowing the intuition to kind of guide you. And then answers come up from all kinds of things, right? It'd be billboard, the radio, songs, somebody phones, a book on your shelf, whatever it might be. Always ask for personal guidance reasons. So we don't ask questions about what somebody else needs to learn or what they need to do differently or better, but we ask questions about our own learning, our own development and growth. So even if it has to do with another person, you might say, how can I better understand where they're coming from? What's getting in the way of our communication? You know, what would make our interaction more effective? Something like that. And you can also use seeking statements. So it can be help me to understand. Now, these are things that you might even use with you know, the people that you're working with. So it could be for self-discovery and also used in your relationships, your coaching relationships or personal relationships. But help me to understand where you're coming from. Or even with ourselves, help me to understand what these emotions are about. Help me to understand my anger. Help me to understand my frustration, whatever it might be. And then listen to your heart. You know, because our minds want to jump in with all the different ideas that it has for what's happening. But the heart is usually where our truth is, you know, and you feel that when you hit on something that rings true for you from a heart-based space. And then it becomes thought and all of those kinds of things. But if you're listening there, you might get guidance that is a little bit outside of the regular box. So now this guiding principle is about transformative relationships. So nobody needs to be fixed, changed, or healed, not even you. Focus instead on transformation, and relationships are the container where the potential for transformation exists. And I mean, that's why I think it's so important that we're paying attention to relationship building. I've noticed with some of the people I've talked to lately in, you know, in the nonprofit world and things like that, that a lot of that people stuff right now is getting put to the sidelines. It's kind of an after, it's more of the tasks and the doing and how we have to respond to different things. But the relationships within organizations are kind of being put to the side. And to me, it's a huge mistake. We have to be nurturing that with each other. So same thing when you're working with somebody as a coach, it's how we're approaching that. So if something isn't working, do we automatically think, well, this person isn't taking the steps, or there's something broken there, or there's something that needs to be fixed, or whatever, or I'm using the wrong method, or I need to try a different approach? Or do we step back and think, well, how's our relationship? Because I mean, that's key, right? If there's no relationship there, then you could offer a million beautiful ideas or suggestions, but there's nowhere for it to land, because there needs to be that trust there. So that's a key piece to think about. And one of the cardinal truths here associated with that principle is that everyone is already whole. So holding the vision of completeness honors the inherent worth of humanity. So when we start thinking about, people needing fixing or healing, we're not seeing them, and we all have those spaces for healing and for fixing, but we're whole anyway. We're still whole, integrated beings. So it's a matter of holding that vision. And I think that's a really big piece of the puzzle, or a big piece of the responsibility of being of service to other people, is that we are able to hold the vision of their completeness and their wholeness. We might not say that, but we're embodying that. Sometimes people don't want to hear that when they feel broken or they feel not well. But it has a lot to do with staying in our own sense of personal power, and knowing that just creates space and just facilitates a space for other people to step into their power. We don't give power, we don't take it away, but we can either, we can facilitate it or we can block it. So it's a choice, right? And it's about maintaining a vision around capacity for growth and change. So always seeing people as having that capacity, knowing that it's there, even if they don't feel it themselves. And really staying in that place of hope and resilience ourselves. If we've lost hope in a certain situation, we're not going to be able to bring it. I mean, that's the main thing, right? Any quality that we want to have present in any interaction, we have to be bringing it. We can't wait for other people to bring that. And then, of course, using powerful guiding questions to get to that. And I think I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and we talked a lot about passion and purpose. And so I just integrated a couple of pieces here. And we talked about this at the beginning, how passion is an expression of self-care, like nurturing that passion inside of ourselves and honoring that is an expression of self-care. And it's a touchstone for innovation and creativity. It gives us capacity, helps us to get in touch with our capacity, and gives us stamina. When we really care about something, we are able to go past barriers. We're able to find another way around. If we don't give a damn, if we have no passion for it, then why would we bother, right? And passion also has us developing, strengthening, and tapping into our resilience in times of struggle. And it's a source of inspiration. And I mean, inspiration is a beautiful quality to be bringing into any kind of service or communication that we're offering with other people. So another reflection question that you can think about here is about how you stay connected to your passionate inspiration now and in any other time. It makes such a world of difference when we're able to tune into that. And it could be very different from the inspiration or the passion that you had at the beginning of your career. So it's an important thing, because I'm hearing that a lot now too, as a self-care strategy, for first responders. We'll tap into that original, like what brought you to do this in the first place. And sure, you can go back to that, but that might not have any meaning for you anymore. So it's more about tapping into the energy of passion and inspiration as it exists for you right now. And then how does that, guide your path and inform your practice? So something else here to think about too, the vision. Holding the vision means that I walk the path with conviction that what I wish to create already exists. So think about, how do you hold the vision for yourself and for others? And again, it's a wobbly path sometimes, right? Like sometimes we're super connected to that. And when I talked about burning out, like hitting the wall sometimes with things, this was sort of what would happen for me. So if I was trying to do something, and I kept hitting barriers or closed doors, and I felt tired or exhausted by it, and then got in that space where I felt like I didn't care about it anymore. So that would be the whole conscious service stuff. I just don't care about it anymore. Maybe it just doesn't matter. And then I would, sort of sit there with that emptiness. And eventually I'd ask myself, can I walk away? Can I walk away from these ideas, from this passion, and be okay? And the answer, obviously, up until now, so far has been no, I can't walk away. So then it would kind of renew my commitment and my conviction, and then get me back in touch with that sense of inspiration and passion again. So it'd be really powerful, you know, when we hit the wall sometimes, because we do. But I think it happens for a reason. I think it happens so that we can recommit and deepen our commitment. So now this last piece here, and you know, you'll have it in your slides, because I don't want to start talking a mile a minute because I can feel like I'm already doing that. But this is the piece that might be helpful if you're working with organizations. So the guiding principle says that the system does not exist without the people. You are joined in creative communion always, and revolution is an inside job. So as we revolutionize ourselves and we grow and evolve inside, then we start contributing from that place. And instead of looking for, are other people doing it, you know, or other people doing what we said we were going to do, we only monitor what we're doing, because it's showing up, right? Walking the talk is one of the most powerful things we can do. So the cardinal truth associated with this says that leadership is an energy, not a position. So it doesn't matter, you know, if someone's an executive director or the CEO or whatever they are, anybody in that space, in that system, can step into a place of self-leadership. And really, I think that is how, you know, especially as independent practitioners too, that's how you create your path. You know, you connect to your passion, your inspiration, what you have to contribute, what makes you great, what you feel good about, what is joyful and fulfilling to you, and you take your curiosity and you let yourself follow that path, and then you start to create the avenues that you can walk down and the best places for your work to land, you know, the best places for contribution. So be leaderful. Again, it's an energy, not a position. Think about your leadership qualities. Be self-leadership, engage in self-leadership. And then it's so much about actions instead of words, right? Like, how am I going to show up? Sometimes I'll ask myself the question, especially when I'm, you know, if I'm having a sour moment, or if I'm bitter about something or whatever. I started this is a couple of years ago, I started doing this, and just asking myself, is this how I want to show up? Do I want to be the person walking down the street with a big frown on my face and the, you know, irritated look, or do I want to look that way while I'm driving the car? You know, I got road rage, you know. So how do I want to show up, and really focusing on the actions that flow out of that. And then looking at our leadership as a form of guidance as opposed to control.
You know, I remember once saying about action, that every time I hear this idea, I think of it, and it's, your actions speak so loud that I cannot hear you. I cannot hear what you're saying.
Yes, I love that one too. I love that one too. And that kind of goes back, totally. It goes back to that ideas around enlightened communication too. You know?
I think sometimes this is brutal. It's a brutal truth. And I don't know if everybody's ready to hear that, but wow, that is just amazing.
And I think that's one of the big frustrations though too, Martha, on this path. Like the more that we go into, you know, being self-reflective and really working on, I can't think of the other word that I wanted to say, but embracing and embodying the ideas of self-connection, that part of what that journey is about is that we will notice things in other people, because that other people serve as a mirror, they serve as a trigger, they push those buttons. And so that's what gets us to be able to practice what we say we want to practice. Like that's what makes our values, you know, virtues, right? If you've read The Power of Full Engagement, the values become virtues, values in action become virtues. And that's how we embody what we say that we want to do. And that's integrity, right? When we're thinking, believing, speaking, acting, you know, feeling, everything is lined up. There's our integrity. We're in and out of it. We could copy thousands of times during the day, really. We have lots of choices. So the practice, the mastery is in the practice. And I think the guidance versus control piece in terms of leadership is really important too, because I've had this conversation with a few people, you know, they talk about organizational effectiveness and all of those kinds of things are buzzwords right now. And I was thinking, to me, it sort of feels like they're talking more about, like, the idea of it is that, well, here's the mandate of the organization, and how do we get the people in the organization to do what we want them to do? So it's not creating a space where everyone's contributing. It's, this is what we think is right, and how now do we get them to buy in, instead of how do we create a space where everyone's contributing to the overall idea. And can you imagine what organizations and communities would be like, how vibrant with that kind of engagement and contribution? Oh, it's huge. Another little piece that came up in this past week that I think is really powerful. It was super powerful for me. It's a game changer. I was talking to this woman that Simon Fraser University, they're starting this network. It's supposed to be response to COVID-19, but there's opportunity for creating communities of practice with people a variety of different topics. So I've been lucky to get involved really quickly. That's where I'm going to be doing my PhD. And I'm hoping that we can create a community of practice that brings together practitioners from all different, health, nonprofit, independent practitioners, to talk about what's really important about the human experience of the professional, and how that vocational fulfillment impacts on the quality of service. But when we were talking, she said there's 3 things, and you maybe heard this: let it happen. 3 approaches: let it happen, make it happen, or help it happen. And I thought, whoa, my God, like that just changed everything. Because I have felt like for years that I've been trying to make something happen. and it doesn't feel right, because it feels like forced, right? It feels like trying to control a process to a certain outcome. But the helping it happen now feels like guidance. It feels like holding a safe space and really having co-creative community. So I just wanted to share that with you, because I thought it was huge for me. So just some thoughts to consider as we come to a close here. Have you busted any myths today? Anybody? Some food for thought.
I think the thing that I think of, which is probably telling of how much self-care I maybe don't have as much as I should, is, in my practice, I coach leaders, and I coach them around their behaviors, and talk a lot about how, as a leader, we often give our very best to our organizations, and we go home and we give our leftovers to our family and the people who matter the most to us. Mm-hmm. And as you're talking about all of this, I'm even thinking about, okay, I gave my best to the people in the office. I gave the leftovers to my family. I gave the scraps to myself.
Oh, yeah.
So it really even resonated with me more in the fact that I know I don't give to myself. I know it's my biggest challenge is I want everybody else to be taken care of, and I forget to take care of myself. But it was interesting how that I've never thought about it in the terms that I give myself the scraps. And I think I can even use that in my coaching when I'm talking about, you want to go home and you want to give your best to your family, but you also want to give your best to yourself. So if you're leaving everything at the office, your family's not going to get anything of value or the full engagement. I love the power of full engagement, by the way. That's one of the things that I really connect with. But I just think about, the self-care piece is kind of being the scraps. And that actually kind of hit home pretty hard. So thank you.
Good. That's good. Thank you for sharing that. Well, that's the integration piece, right?
And Elizabeth, I just wanted to share a question from Melissa.
Sure.
That, I don't know if you have time to address it before the end, but I thought it was a good question. It says, when self-care becomes a to-do list, then is it really self-care or self-love?
No, I don't think it is. I think that that's the way we've approached it, though, that self-care is like an add-on. You do it later. You do it, you carve out some space, where I think genuine self-care is like an embodiment of it. So that's why if we are saying that who I am has everything to do with how I serve and how I show up, there's a direct impact. It means we have to really integrate our personal love for things, our personal, again, inspiration, enthusiasm, our ideas, like all of that. Like you really need to get comfortable with what you know you have to contribute. And that's just having inner authority. That's not being conceited or being arrogant. It's just embracing, like, yeah, I'm good at X, Y, or Z. And that's how I want to contribute, because then I feel really energized by that, and I know that it's something that's going to land somewhere, right? And even if it doesn't, I'm going to feel good because I'm going to enjoy it, you know? And I think the other piece too is that we have to stop saying, put on my oxygen mask before I put on someone else's. You know what? Even if you're alone on the plane, put on your damn oxygen mask. Like it doesn't matter. You know, it shouldn't be that we care for ourselves so we can give more. It should be that we care for ourselves because that's our responsibility, and we love ourselves enough to do that so we can feel good. Definitely, that's a good question. So here's just a few more things you can look at there afterwards. And here's how you can contact me if you want to talk more. And again, I mentioned that community of practice thing. So if anyone's interested in talking more about that, or as things evolve and you'd like to be updated on different places where they're likely to pop up, just let me know and I can keep you posted. It's really a space for innovation and creativity, and taking what we're learning now and everyone contributing and seeing how that might, you know, set the stage for transformation that's been long overdue. So feel free. I'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you all so much for being here and participating. What a great conversation. I hope you had fun.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It was great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so
much for connecting.
Honored to have you, Elizabeth. Before we go, let's have one more round of questions if anybody has any questions for Elizabeth. And before I forget, Elizabeth, I believe that at the beginning of the webinar, you mentioned that you had a couple of websites that you wanted to share with us that include some information.
There was one other piece too. So you can find my website right here. It's just elizabethbishopconsulting.com. And so if you want to leave your email, I don't send out very many emails, but if you want to, there's a few user-friendly guides that evolved out of my research. So just around developing self-reflective practice for ourselves and with other people, and with organizational leadership and that kind of stuff as well. So that might be helpful if you're working with organizations. And I send out emails maybe every couple of months just to give updates on what's going on. But I've been doing a little piece with Thrive Global. It's Ariana Huffington's space there. So if you go to thriveglobal.com and you type in, if you put search and then type in conscious service or hashtag conscious service, you'll come to a space where there's several articles by me and also a few of my colleagues. So feel free to check that out. And if you are interested and would like to contribute to that, just let me know. And what they've been doing, the partnership, is that they've just been amplifying the posts. So they actually show up on the front few pages of the 5,000 pages of articles that are on Thrive Global in the community section. So it just gives us a little bit of space in there to talk about these kinds of ideas. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? I still don't know what time it is.
We have another minute, but it's okay if we go over a couple minutes.
Okay, great.
I want to ask you if this is related to conscious leadership.
And what do you mean?
Because it's a whole movement by one of the guys that started, that is COO of LinkedIn.
Oh, right. No, my stuff is just stuff that I developed, but I think it actually interfaces really well with a lot of other things and movements that are going on out there. Definitely, and I'm sure that there would be parallels for sure. I'm starting to find a lot more like-minded and like-hearted people lately, where the language, because I was saying to someone last week that I felt like for a long time, because I started this work probably about 25 years ago, that for a long time I was like, you know, talking at a place where only dogs could hear, you know, blah, 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 ginger, or the pitcher, you know, and just felt like it was like echoing and it wasn't landing. But I'm noticing now that there's more and more people having the same kinds of ideas and conversations, which I think is so amazing. Like finally, you know,
Yes.
it's really good.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for all these insights. Really,
oh, thank you for sharing.
So important to bring them back to our thinking, and you know, at this time is very, very crucial when we do that. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Martha.
To the forefront, right?
Yeah. It's easy to sweep under the rug. Go ahead, Denise.
One of the other things that I think about, and I went through this in one of the programs I went through, was when you're setting goals and you set personal goals, to set a goal that's really, really selfish. Just as selfish as you can make it, in order to help practice, you know, that self-care and those type of things, is just have some goals that are really all about you, whether, you know, whatever it is. I mean, we talked in the beginning about the different things that we do for self-care, but make those goals very, very selfish, or what you feel is selfish. And I think that's the piece of it, is a lot of times the self-care is because we don't want to feel selfish. So if you make a goal seem selfish to you, then that's when you're getting to the deepness of it being, you know, self-care.
For sure. And you hear that from caregivers all the time. It's selfish for me to take time. I work with a group of family caregivers, and that comes up all the time. You know, it's one of those thoughts, one of those myths. One of my favorite authors, and you maybe have heard of her, Iyanla Vanzant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she talks about self-full.
Yes.
Like SELF-full, not selfish. Because we have, you know, we have thoughts that come up, right, you know, selfish. Like if somebody calls you selfish, it's like almost the worst thing to be called.
Yeah.
You know, for some of us. So I really like that idea, doing that and doing it just for the sake. Because, you know, if you think about it, if we're not caring, like who else is going to care then for those needs? Who else is going to have like our own back? How do you know, so think of it that way. You have your own back, you're looking out for yourself, because if we don't, then we end up, that kind of eventually overflows onto other people in some way, right? Either we're not there in relationship with them, or we start expecting things from people that they can't give us, right? And at the very least, and horribly, we become really unhappy, which isn't great.
That's right. When we put everybody else first and forget that we're important too, after a while, it, you know, instead of doing it with joy, we begin feeling very resentful, and that's getting into a cycle of sacrifice that is very unhealthy for ourselves and for the people around us. So thank you, Elizabeth, for talking about a topic that is crucial, not just in the times that we are living, because we are needed more than ever, probably, but on a daily basis. This is crucial, right? We only have one body, we only have one life. We need to take really good care of it, and need to become aware that, make a conscious effort to not forget about ourselves, that if we're okay, we can help others.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key. And that's the final little thing to think about. It's an in the moment thing. So we can have our plans, we can make those foundations, yes, no, this, all of that. But it's having a practice in the moment where you're tuned in with what you're feeling, and you can say, what do I need right now? What is it that I'm looking for? What's happening? How am I feeling? You know, because then too, it's not only responding to the needs, it's also being able to really savor those moments when it's like, oh God, I feel really happy. I feel really good this morning. Like, let me just lay here for a second and soak that up, you know, and really getting in touch with that. It's powerful, but it is in the moment. That mastery is in the practice, for sure.
It is. So thank you again, Elizabeth. It has been an honor and privilege to have you. We had a small group. There were 8 of us today, but you were all wonderful, participating and sharing and exchanging ideas, and that made it very intimate and wonderful.